I had everything most women dreamed of. David loved me unconditionally. We'd been married for 6 years, and he worked long hours as an architect to give us the life we'd always talked about. He remembered every anniversary, surprised me with thoughtful gifts, never raised his voice even when we argued. You're so lucky. Clara told me constantly, David treats you like a queen. I didn't feel lucky. I felt suffocated. David was predictable, safe, boring. Our conversations revolved around bills and grocery lists and what we do on the weekend. The passion I'd felt when we first started dating had faded into comfortable routine. I craved excitement, spontaneity, the kind of romance I read about in novels. Then I met Adrian at a work conference. He was everything David wasn't: charming, mysterious, dangerous. He worked in finance, wore expensive suits, and had this confidence that made my heart race. When he looked at me, I felt alive for the first time in years. We started talking during coffee breaks, then exchanging numbers, then late-night phone calls that made me feel like a teenager again. You deserve more than a comfortable life, Adrian whispered to me during one of our stolen moments. You deserve passion, adventure, someone who truly sees you. I believed him. God, how I believed every word. Within 3 months, I'd made my decision. My mother tried to talk sense into me. You're throwing away something precious for a fantasy, she warned. Clara practically begged me to reconsider. Think about what you're doing. David loves you. But I was blind, drunk on the intoxication of new love. I told David on a cold February evening, I'm leaving you. I'm not happy anymore. I need more than this. The look of devastation on his face should have stopped me. But I'd already convinced myself I was the victim in a loveless marriage. David didn't fight. He just nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. Is there someone else? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He already knew. Moving in with Adrian felt like stepping into a dream. His apartment was sleek and modern, overlooking the city skyline. He swept me off my feet with romantic dinners, weekend getaways, passionate attention I'd been craving. I can't believe I wasted so many years, I told him one night as we lay in his expensive sheets. You've shown me what I was missing. He kissed my forehead. You deserve the world, baby. David never appreciated you the way I do. The divorce proceedings started quickly. David didn't contest anything. He let me have more than I deserved from our shared assets, probably just wanting to end the pain. His lawyer looked at him with pity when he agreed to my terms without negotiation. My relationship with my family deteriorated rapidly. What you did is a disgrace, my mother said when I called her. Then she hung up. My younger sister Emma, who'd always looked up to me, now avoided my calls. Clara tried to maintain our friendship, but there was distance between us now, judgment in her eyes she tried to hide but couldn't. They'll come around eventually, Adrian assured me when I cried about losing my family's support. They're just jealous that you had the courage to choose happiness. But small cracks began appearing in Adrian's perfect facade. He started working later hours, often coming home smelling of alcohol and perfume. When I questioned him, he'd get defensive. You're being insecure and paranoid, he'd snap. His phone would buzz with messages he'd quickly delete. Who was that? I'd ask. Jesus. Can I have some space? You're suffocating me. I left everything for you, I reminded him during one argument. The least you can do is be honest with me, and I didn't ask you to do that, he shot back, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. You made that choice yourself. Don't put that burden on me. His words stung, but I pushed the doubts away. I'd burned too many bridges to turn back. I'd destroyed my marriage, alienated my family, damaged my reputation. I needed this relationship to work because the alternative, admitting I'd made a catastrophic mistake, was too painful to consider. Then I discovered I was pregnant. I stared at the positive pregnancy test for 10 minutes, my hands shaking. A baby, Adrian's baby. Despite everything, I felt a surge of hope. A baby would bring us closer. It would give our relationship the foundation it needed. I planned the perfect moment to tell him. I cooked his favorite dinner, bought expensive champagne for him, and waited nervously. When he finally walked through the door at nearly 11 o'clock, he looked exhausted and annoyed. We need to talk, I said, my heart pounding. He sighed heavily. Can it wait? I've had a brutal day. No, it can't. I took a deep breath. Adrian, I'm pregnant. The silence was deafening. I watched his face carefully, waiting for joy, surprise, excitement. Instead, I saw panic and horror. You're what? His voice was barely a whisper. Pregnant. We're going to have a baby. I tried to smile. I know it's unexpected, but unexpected. It's a disaster. He ran his hands through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. How did this happen? I thought you were on birth control. I was, but nothing is 100%. Jesus Christ. This can't be happening. He wasn't even looking at me now. This is the worst possible timing. My career, my life. I'm not ready for this. We're not ready for this. But we can be, I pleaded, feeling panic rise in my chest. People figure it out. We'll figure it out together. He finally looked at me. What I saw in his eyes broke something inside me. No love, no tenderness, no partnership, just resentment and regret. I need some time to think, he said coldly. I'm going to stay at a friend's place tonight. He grabbed his jacket and keys. Before I could say another word, he was gone. I stood alone in that expensive apartment, one hand on my stomach, tears streaming down my face, finally understanding what a terrible mistake I'd made. But I didn't know yet just how much worse it was about to get. Adrian didn't come back the next day, or the day after that. His phone went straight to voicemail. His office told me he'd taken an unexpected leave of absence. His friends claimed they had no idea where he was. 1 week passed, then 2, then 3. I was living in his apartment, pregnant with his child, and he had simply vanished. The rent came due. I realized with growing horror that I had no access to his bank accounts, no way to pay the bills. The utilities started getting shut off one by one. First the internet, then the electricity, then the water. I'd used most of my divorce settlement to buy expensive furniture for Adrian's place and fund our extravagant lifestyle. My savings were nearly depleted. I tried calling David once, late at night in a moment of desperate weakness. He answered on the third ring. Hello. His voice was cautious, guarded. David. I couldn't finish the sentence. What could I possibly say? There was a long pause. Why are you calling me? I needed to hear your voice. Another pause, longer this time. I can't do this. Please don't call me again. The line went dead. I deserved that. I deserved all of this. Clara was the only one who still took my calls, though even her patience was wearing thin. Where's Adrian? She asked when I finally broke down and told her everything. Gone, just gone. He left me. Clara, I'm pregnant and he abandoned me. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Oh my God, what are you going to do? I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. I was sobbing now, ugly crying. I destroyed my life for him. I left David. I lost my family. I gave up everything. And he just disappeared like I meant nothing. You need to come stay with me, Clara said firmly. Pack whatever you can carry. You can't stay in that apartment. But before I could take her up on the offer, the landlord appeared with an eviction notice. Apparently, Adrian hadn't paid rent in 2 months and had been subletting illegally. I had 72 hours to vacate. I had nowhere to go. My mother still wasn't speaking to me. David had moved on. My pride wouldn't let me burden Clara with a pregnant, homeless friend. I'd burned every bridge. Now I was standing alone on an island watching the flames destroy any hope of return. I was completely and utterly alone. I spent my first night homeless, sleeping in my car in a grocery store parking lot, crying until I had no tears left. Everything I owned was crammed into the backseat. A few clothes, some personal items, and the framed photo of my wedding day with David that I couldn't bring myself to throw away. In that photo, I looked so happy, so secure, so loved. That woman felt like a stranger now. The next morning, I drove to a women's shelter that Clara had found for me. The intake coordinator, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, took down my information without judgment. How far along are you? She asked, glancing at my still flat stomach. Almost 3 months, she nodded. We'll make sure you get to your prenatal appointments. Have you applied for any assistance programs? The reality crashed over me again. I was applying for government assistance. Who just 6 months ago had lived in a beautiful home with a successful husband, was now dependent on charity to survive. Not yet, I whispered. We'll help you with that too. Patricia's voice was gentle. You're not the first woman to end up here after leaving everything for the wrong person. And you won't be the last. But you're taking the first step, and that's what matters. The shelter was clean but depressing. Rows of bunk beds in a large room, shared bathrooms, strict curfews. My bunkmate was a woman named Teresa who'd escaped an abusive relationship with her 2 young daughters. Every night, I lay awake thinking about how I'd gotten here. I replayed every decision, every moment I'd chosen Adrian over David, every warning sign I'd ignored. The guilt was suffocating. One afternoon, about a week into my shelter stay, I was sitting in the common area when an older woman named Margaret sat down beside me. She was a shelter volunteer who taught job skills classes. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, she said gently. I deserve to, I replied bitterly. I did this to myself. Margaret studied me for a moment. Can I tell you something? I made a similar mistake 30 years ago. Left a good man for an exciting one who promised me the moon and stars. He left me with 2 babies and mountains of debt. I thought my life was over. What did you do? I survived. I worked 3 jobs. I went to community college at night. I rebuilt my life piece by piece. And you know what? I became stronger than I ever would have been if things had been easy. She patted my hand. You're not defined by your worst mistake, you're defined by how you rise from it. Her words planted a small seed of hope in my chest. Maybe I could survive this, maybe I could rebuild. I couldn't let go of my questions about Adrian. Where had he gone? Why had he abandoned me so completely? Part of me still hoped there was some explanation. I needed closure. Clara offered to hire a private investigator. With money she'd been saving for a vacation, you need to know the truth. She insisted, you need to understand what really happened so you can move forward. The investigator, a weathered man named Robert Chen, took exactly 2 weeks to uncover Adrian's true nature. When he called me to his office, I could tell from his expression the news wasn't good. I'm going to be direct with you, Robert said, sliding a folder across his desk. Adrian Castellano isn't who he claimed to be. My hands trembled as I opened. The folder inside were photographs, documents, printed social media profiles. He's a con artist. Robert continued. He targets married women, specifically women in stable financial situations, who seem emotionally vulnerable. He creates an intense romantic relationship, encourages them to leave their spouses, and then systematically drains their resources before disappearing. I felt like I couldn't breathe. How many? You're the 7th woman we've been able to confirm in the last 5 years. He pulled out more photographs. This is Jennifer Martinez. He convinced her to leave her husband and invest in a fake business venture. She lost her entire inheritance. This is Samantha Cho. He got her to buy a condo in his name before vanishing. She's still paying the mortgage on a property she doesn't legally own. Oh God, I whispered, staring at faces of women who looked just like me. The name Adrian Castellano is fake. His real name is Marcus Webb, and he has a criminal record for fraud and identity theft in 3 states. The finance job was fake. The friends you met were accomplices. Even the apartment wasn't his. He was squatting there after scamming the actual tenant. Everything had been a lie. Every word, every touch, every promise. Is he in custody? I asked, my voice hollow. Not yet. He's good at disappearing, but we've notified the authorities, and they're building a case. With your testimony and evidence from other victims, they may be able to finally bring him to justice. I left Robert's office in a daze. I'd destroyed my life for a man who'd never existed. The Adrian I'd fallen in love with was a character, a role played by a criminal who'd seen me coming from a mile away, and now I was carrying his child. A permanent reminder of my catastrophic failure and judgment. For months into my pregnancy, I was living in a small studio apartment that a nonprofit organization helped me secure. I'd found work at a call center that offered maternity leave. Margaret had become a mentor and friend, checking in on me regularly. Then Clara called with unexpected news. You need to see this, she said, sending me a link to a news article. Notorious con artist arrested after elaborate scheme unravels. The headline read, Marcus Webb, known to his victims as Adrian Castellano among other aliases, had been arrested after his latest target, a wealthy widow named Diane Richardson, had grown suspicious and contacted authorities. When police raided his hotel room, they'd found fake IDs, forged documents, and evidence connecting him to dozens of victims across multiple states. I stared at Marcus's face in the mugshot. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. No longer the charismatic figure who'd swept me off my feet. Just a criminal, pathetic and caught. The district attorney is seeking maximum penalties, the article continued. Victims are being encouraged to come forward to testify. I contacted the DA's office that afternoon. Over the following weeks, I joined 6 other women in building a case against Marcus. We met once, all of us sitting in a conference room, sharing our stories. I left my husband and 2 children, one woman said, tears streaming down her face. I haven't seen them in a year. I filed for bankruptcy, another added. He convinced me to take out loans in my name for his investments. We were all victims. But there was something empowering about standing together, turning our pain into testimony that would ensure he couldn't do this to anyone else. The trial was set for 6 months away, right around my due date. Marcus pled not guilty, claiming the relationships were consensual. But the evidence was overwhelming. Watching him squirm in court during preliminary hearings gave me dark satisfaction. He'd destroyed so many lives without remorse. Now he would finally face consequences. Still, his downfall didn't erase my mistakes. It didn't bring back my marriage to David, repair my relationship with my family, or undo the choices that had led me here. That would have to come from somewhere else. I was 7 months pregnant, shopping for baby supplies at a discount store. When I saw him, David was standing in the checkout line. My heart stopped. He looked different, leaner, with a short beard and glasses I'd never seen him wear before. He looked good, happy. Even before I could turn and disappear, he saw me. Our eyes met across the store. I watched complex emotions flash across his face: surprise, pain, confusion. He walked over slowly, his eyes dropping to my very pregnant belly. "Hi," he said quietly. "Hi." My voice was barely a whisper. "You look well, so do you." It was a polite lie. I looked exhausted and worn, my clothes from a thrift store. "When are you due?" "2 months." I couldn't meet his eyes. "David, I don't." He held up a hand. "Please don't apologize right now. I'm not ready to hear it." "Okay," I nodded. Tears already forming. "I understand." We stood in awkward silence. For a moment, "Are you doing all right?" he asked. "I mean, are you safe? Do you have what you need?" The question broke something in me. Even after everything I'd done to him, he was concerned about my welfare. "I'm managing," I said. "I'm working, I have a place to live, I'm getting by." He nodded slowly. "And the father, gone?" It's a long story, but he was a con artist. He's in jail now awaiting trial." I saw a flash of anger in David's eyes. Protective instinct that apparently still existed despite everything. "He hurt you." "I hurt myself." I corrected. "I made terrible choices and I'm living with the consequences. You tried to warn me." "Everyone did, but I wouldn't listen." "No, you wouldn't." His voice wasn't cruel, just honest. "I spent months being angry with you. Then I spent months being angry at myself, wondering what I did wrong. What I could have done differently to make you stay." "You didn't do anything wrong," I said firmly. "You were a good husband. The best." I was the one who was broken, who didn't appreciate what I had. He studied me for a long moment. "I'm glad you're safe. I'm glad you're getting your life together." "I mean that sincerely. Are you with someone now?" I had to know. Even though the answer would hurt, a small smile crossed his face. "Actually, yes, her name is Rachel. She's a teacher. We've been dating for 3 months. Taking it slow." "I'm happy for you," I said, and I meant it. "You deserve someone who appreciates you." My daughter was born on a cold December morning, 3 weeks before Christmas. Labor was long and difficult. I went through it alone except for Clara, who held my hand and coached me through each contraction. When the nurse finally placed that tiny, screaming bundle in my arms, I felt a love so overwhelming it brought me to my knees emotionally. "She's beautiful," Clara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look at her perfect little fingers." I stared at my daughter, my Lily, and made a silent promise. I would be better for her. I would rebuild my life so she would never have to pay for my mistakes. The first person to visit me in the hospital besides Clara was Margaret. She brought a handmade baby blanket and a card with a simple message. "Every ending is a new beginning." The second unexpected visitor was my sister Emma. She appeared in the doorway nervously, holding a teddy bear. "Can I come in?" she asked hesitantly. "Emma." I started crying immediately. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." She rushed to my bedside, hugging me carefully around the baby. "I know, Mom's still too hurt and angry, but I couldn't let you go through this alone. You're still my sister." We cried together, reconciliation happening in that hospital room over the head of my sleeping newborn. Emma told me my mother was slowly softening. Maybe in time she would come around. It was a small hope, but I clung to it. 3 days after Lily was born, I received a letter forwarded from the DA's office. It was from Marcus, written from jail, against my better judgment. I opened it. "I know you probably hate me. You have every right to. I've done terrible things, hurt innocent people, and I'm facing the consequences now. But I wanted you to know that of all the women I manipulated, you were the only one I felt genuine guilt about. Maybe because I saw real hope in your eyes. Or maybe because I knew you were destroying something real from my lies. I can't undo what I did. But I wanted to say I'm sorry. The baby is better off without me in its life. I hope you rebuild everything I helped destroy." I read the letter 3 times, then threw it away. His apology meant nothing. Words couldn't repair the damage he'd caused. As I sat in that hospital room, holding Lily and watching her sleep, I realized something profound. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the pain I'd caused David, my family, and myself. But I could choose who I became moving forward. I chose resilience, for Lily, for myself. 2 years passed. They were the hardest years of my life, but also the most transformative. I worked during the day, took online business courses at night, devoted every spare moment to Lily. Margaret helped with childcare. Clara remained my steadfast friend. Emma visited regularly, slowly bridging the gap between me and our mother. Marcus was sentenced to 15 years in prison for fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation. I attended the sentencing hearing and gave my victim impact statement, looking him in the eye as I described how he destroyed my life. When the judge handed down the sentence, I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no revenge, just emptiness where anger used to be. He was no longer important enough to occupy space in my emotional life. The real surprise came on a Saturday afternoon when I was at the park with Lily. She was toddling around the playground, laughing as I pushed her on the baby swing. When I saw David again, this time he had a woman with him. Rachel, I assumed. They were walking hand in hand, comfortable and happy together. I prepared myself for pain, jealousy, regret. But what I felt instead was genuine happiness for him. He'd moved on and found someone who would treat him the way he deserved. He saw me and waved. Then, to my surprise, he walked over with Rachel. "This is Rachel," he said simply. "Rachel, this is my ex-wife and her daughter Lily." Rachel smiled warmly, without judgment or awkwardness. "It's nice to meet you. David's told me about your situation. I'm sorry for what you went through." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "It's nice to meet you too." We talked for a few minutes, surface conversation about the weather, the park, how quickly children grow. It was civil, even friendly in a distant way. When they left, David paused and said something that stayed with me. "You look different, stronger." "Somehow, I am stronger," I replied. "Pain has a way of either breaking you or forging you into something unbreakable." "I chose the latter." He nodded with approval. "Good, that's good. Take care of yourself and that beautiful little girl." As I watched them walk away, I realized I'd finally let go of the past. I'd forgiven David for moving on. I'd forgiven my family for their initial rejection. Most importantly, I'd begun forgiving myself. 3 years after Lily was born, I stood in my own small apartment, not rented, but owned. I'd saved aggressively, worked promotions, finally qualified for a first-time homebuyer program. It wasn't the house I'd shared with David, but it was mine, earned through my own effort and determination. My mother had finally come around 6 months earlier, meeting her granddaughter for the first time with tears streaming down her face. "I was so angry," she admitted, "but I was also scared for you. I'm proud of how you've rebuilt your life." That reconciliation meant everything to me. My family wasn't perfect or completely healed, but we were talking, visiting, slowly stitching together what had been torn apart. I'd started a small consulting business helping other women who'd been victims of financial fraud, using my painful experience to prevent others from suffering similarly. Margaret had become Lily's honorary grandmother. Clara remained my best friend, the one who never gave up on me even when I'd given up on myself. As for David, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd gotten engaged to Rachel. I sent them a card congratulating them with no expectation of response. To my surprise, he sent back a simple text, "Thank you, I hope you're well." We weren't friends, we would never be close again. But we'd both found peace with what happened, and that was enough. I looked at Lily sleeping in her toddler bed, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. She would grow up knowing my story age appropriately. Of course, she would learn that people make mistakes, sometimes catastrophic ones. But those mistakes don't have to define your entire life. I'd lost everything for the wrong person. But in losing everything, I'd found out who I really was, and the woman I'd become, humble, resilient, and wise, was someone I could finally respect. I'd survived, and survival, I learned, was its own form of victory. The end.